Welcome into the podcast. I'm thankful for the growing audience that we have and also for the feedback that I get. Keep that coming. If I had to boil this podcast down to one description, I would say biblical worldview. I am passionate about helping you process everything through a biblical lens. So that would include how to understand the Bible, how to view current events biblically, apologetic issues, all kinds of things fall within that, which is why you see what you see here on the different episodes of the podcast. But there is one aspect about this that really matters a ton to me, and it's making sure that the younger generations get this type of worldview training. Why? Why is it more important that they get this than anyone else? Because they are the first generation that gets all their information from the internet, specifically social media. And social media is a hotbed of wrong information about biblical issues. In fact, if a person has a question about the Bible and they go in and they search on something like TikTok for the answer, what's going to happen is more than likely they're going to be steered toward the wrong answers instead of the right answers. And once you begin to go through that chain, they just keep offering you more and more videos that kind of give that perspective. And so because of that, I'm very passionate about helping parents lead these discussions with their children. And I think it's very, very important that parents be better equipped than my generation or the generation before was to lead these conversations with their kids. So today what I want to talk about is I want to focus in on some important thoughts on how to parent your kids in a postmodern, post-Christian world. So the first thing is I probably need to define that, right? Post-Christian, pretty obvious. We don't live in a world that functions by Christianity anymore, and we did. Not that everyone was a Christian, not that we were a Christian nation, but Christian principles undergirded everything, and people just kind of thought that way. But when we talk about postmodern, let me just kind of read something here that Summit Ministry says about this, and I really encourage you to follow them. They say the pre-modern era was one in which religion was the source of truth and reality. God's existence and revelation were givens in the culture. In the modern era, science became the source of truth and reality. During this period, religion and morality were arbitrarily demoted to the subjective realm. Have you seen that? In the present postmodern era, there is no single defining source for truth and reality beyond the individual. Postmodernism simply radicalized relativism and individualism and then applied them to all spheres of knowledge, even science. In a postmodern world, truth and reality are understood to be individually shaped by personal history, social class, gender, culture, and religion. So in a sense, the pre-modern era was a time where religion was seen as the source of truth. Now, there may have been superstition and things like that going on. So, I think people in the modern and postmodern era like to point back to that and go, yeah, well, that's when, we burned witches and, whatever. But when someone asks what is true, they use religion as the filter to determine what was true. Now, I'm not saying they always used it correctly, okay? So I'm not saying, that was the heyday. But as scientific study began to explode, by the way, much of which was led by believers who were exploring God's creation, we began to only hold to what we could see and test and touch and verify. That's what truth was. Of course, evolution also gained ground during that time, so religion was just kind of relegated to something that was nice if you want to believe in it, but certainly has nothing to do with truth. And that's what Eric Hovind and I were talking about a few episodes ago, that we see even Christians sometimes separate their faith from the real world, as if God and science and all that can't possibly mix. And so they may believe in evolution, even though the Bible doesn't support that idea and tells a completely different story, but they see that as separate from their faith. Well, that's science, this is faith. And so we've kind of fallen into that trap, sometimes even within the church. But now we've moved beyond that to this individualistic determination of truth, postmodern. This is why you have scientists who support transing kids. They said even science has been taken over by this relativistic, individualistic approach. And so scientifically, it makes no sense whatsoever why you would be for that, but it's all about that kid's truth. If we're going by objective truth, we would tell the kid that, hey, kids get confused sometimes, and that's okay. We just need to work through this. Growing up can be confusing, but the best thing for you is to live by reality. but we're not going by objective truth. Years ago, Josh McDowell wrote a book called The New Tolerance, where he talks about a family that raised their kids in church and taught them all the right things. But one day their child was when they were grown, they started making unbiblical choices. And when the parent has a discussion with them about this, their child says this: I really appreciate the way that you all raised me. I really respect it. And I think it's great for you. It's just not true for me. Now, since he wrote that book, he was warning parents about this trend. But since he wrote that book, we've moved past that point now, right? Like now we have people living in sinful lifestyles insisting that we all have to actively support their lifestyle. They're no longer okay with respecting what we believe if we believe differently. So things have changed there a little bit. So the question is, how do we raise our kids in an environment like what I just described? More and more kids are walking away from their faith and heading down the path of deconstruction. So what are the things that we really need to focus on? Let me give you 4 things, okay? 4 things that you really need to focus on. Number 1, you need to be the real deal. Half-hearted Christianity will no longer raise Christian kids. It used to be that all of culture kind of surrounded your kid and kind of pointed in the right direction, and even people who wanted to do something different would often look at a kid and say, hey, don't follow me, I'm a bad example, right? And so they would get what they got from church and maybe send them to a Christian school or whatever, and honestly, they did okay, even if you weren't totally on as a Christian. And so when I say you need to be the real deal, let me clarify some things I'm talking about, some things I'm not talking about. I am saying that you need to make church a huge priority. It needs to be a huge priority. But also, I am not saying that you're at the church every night of the week. I don't think that's necessarily necessary. Or that you think as long as you took them to church, they're going to be fine. From my generation, I see so many people going, I don't understand it. I had them in church. As if that was the whole thing, right? It's important. It's super important. Like I think we've downplayed it, right? We've kind of made this idea of, well, it's not really, parents are the main influence and that kind of thing, but but it's not really about being at church all the time, right? Or being there faithfully or being involved, that kind of thing. So let me just say this. If your kids are making plans for the weekend and they ever ask you, are we planning on going to church this weekend? You are already losing this battle. If your home is a home where kids are like, sometimes we go and sometimes we don't. Not we're on vacation, like or something like that. Or not that we take, two Sundays a year, to go to a theme park, or whatever. Like, no, but just, hey, we're home for the weekend. And we sometimes go and we sometimes don't. If that's what they're already thinking, you're already losing the battle. Both of my kids played travel sports. But we found an option that almost never started on Sundays before 1 p.m. if they played on Sundays. There are only 2 occasions where my kids missed a Sunday morning or a youth group for sports. My oldest daughter missed a youth group. Her team ended up in the championship one Sunday afternoon. All the games had started probably at 1 o'clock and had just run long. So the championship that should have started at 5 and been done at 6, and then we run her over to youth group, didn't start till 6:30. I mean, it started after youth group was already starting. And so the game should have already been done before youth group, but it wasn't. And she had worked hard all weekend to get to that championship, so we let her stay and play. She was conflicted about it. Like she wasn't that happy about it. The other time was with my other daughter, the younger one. Like I said, we almost never played before 1 p.m. on Sundays, but one weekend our coach got an idea to put us in another tournament that did start on Sunday morning. And as we approached Sunday, it was clear that we only had 4 players. I'd already told him we're not playing on Sunday morning. And it was clear that we only had 4 players to play that 11 o'clock Sunday game. And so the coach called me and he asked me if she went to first service at our church, then could he pick her up and drive her to the game? He knew that I had responsibilities. I couldn't be there till the end of Sunday morning activities. And but he said, hey, if she goes to first service, she gets to go to church And then we pick her up and we take her to the game. And we agreed to that. We said, hey, that's great. We don't want to have to forfeit at this point in the tournament. The only problem was it snowed that night and our church canceled the first service that she could have gone to. And I'm going to tell you, she was actually angry that she was missing church, but we had already committed and promised her team, so just that once we did that. Basically what I'm saying is if your kids see that any chance you get, you miss church, or that you're just an attender and you're not actually a part of the church's mission, listen, they will not waste their time doing that same dance as adults. Just think about it. What they're seeing, what they're processing is it's not that important. We do it when it works out. If we have something else fun to do, we go do that. My parents were never integral to the mission of the church. Why did they waste their time the other 2 Sundays a month? I'm not doing that. They'll walk away. Part of this too is showing your kids that Christian community is extremely important to you. Don't remain anonymous. Get deeply involved in personal relationships in your church. Be in a group. Live life with those people. Listen, this is so important. When you disagree or hurt each other, show your kids what it looks like to biblically settle those issues. So much of the deconstruction movement is based on this church hurt stuff. Listen, I will tell you, my kids don't even realize how much church hurt they've experienced. And you know why? Because they know that we aren't all perfect. And so when things happen, you settle them and you still value those long-term relationships. You don't walk away from long-term relationships because somebody hurts you. You work it out. Now, some church hurt is real. I'm not trying to underestimate all of that. They're oppressive situations. No doubt in some cases people are on power trips and you can go and talk to them and try to work it out and do the right thing, do the Christian thing. And ultimately you just need to be at a different church. I get that. But as a pastor for over 30 years, I have seen so much ticky-tacky little, I just kind of don't like this, or this person said this, and so I think I'll just go somewhere else. That is not the body of Christ. In the New Testament, you didn't even have that choice. There was the church at Ephesus. Somebody hurts you, you got to work it out, right? And unfortunately, I think it's fine. I think it's great. Some people say, oh, the church is not unified, but I think it's great. There's all kinds of options in your city. But never leave a church because somebody wronged you or you got hurt by somebody and you didn't go and deal with it first. Never. Deal with it and do your very dead level best to work it out and let your kids see that. I'm telling you, it will rock their world. And of course, the biggest thing about being the real deal is that you are actually the real deal all week. You're walking with Jesus. You're modeling that. You're having spiritual conversations with your kids about what you're learning. It's not that you're perfect, but that you hold a biblical worldview, and when you fall short, you hold yourself accountable to God's word. If you take them to church, but you're a legalist at home, or you're hateful at home, or you talk about other people all the time at home, or you're undermining your youth pastor at home, don't expect your kids to see any value in what you say you believe. All right, be the real deal. Second thing, part of being the real deal does mean that you are instrumental in the mission of your church and the mission of Jesus. So the second thing is you need to teach your kids to be influencers for Jesus. If your kids are leaders, you don't have to worry about what they're following. So expect your kids to lead other people to Jesus. Coach them on how to have conversations. Put them in situations where they can have conversations that might challenge their faith. This brings up so many great questions and therefore so many great conversations that you need to be dealing with. And it makes them hungry to hear those things. Just think about this. Think about this context between you saying, hey, let me sit you down tonight and explain to you how we know that Jesus was a real person who really walked on the earth. And that what we know about him is true. Man, I mean, honestly, if you're a 8-year-old, like you're just rolling around and you're just like, when is this over? If they go to school and they're trying to look for opportunities to share their faith, and they tell another kid on the playground that they follow Jesus, and the other kid says, my parent says there's no evidence that Jesus is a real person, guess what? They're going to come home and say, Mom, Dad, they said that Jesus wasn't even a real person. Like I didn't know what to say. Well, guess what? They want to hear now, right? They want to hear the answer for how we know that Jesus really did walk on the earth, live a sinless life, die on the cross, and rise again. right? When you have that conversation with them when they're in elementary school or middle school, they're ready for what they're going to face in college, where you are not there to even know what they're being told, much less have that conversation with them. Your kids will best get this concept, if you as a family are on mission. They will get this if you as a family are on mission. So take mission trips together, serve with your church in the community, talk about spiritual conversations that you are having with coworkers, so that they can see, see that this is what believers naturally do. Go back and listen to the episode about that I did about the greatest missing piece of our spiritual growth to better understand what I'm saying here, because it is so, so important. The other thing that I will say about teaching them to be influencers is this. Do what you have to do to make sure that your kids get a great education and are not overwhelmed with lies. Do that. Some people can send their kids to their local public school and successfully debrief a few lies a year. Overall, good schools, good people, and their kids have a great opportunity to influence others who don't know Jesus. Some people feel like their schools are way too invested in indoctrinating kids, and they choose a different option, and that's fine. But let me say two things. So important that you get this. First of all, if your kids are not automatically around lost people because of your schooling choice, you still need to find environments where they have that opportunity. It might be a sports team or something like that, but make it clear that part of the reason that they're on that team is to look for opportunities to have spiritual conversations. And that plays into the second one, because if you remove them from an opportunity to be around lost people and you don't do what I just said and find them an opportunity to be around lost people, you may be giving your kids this impression. And so the second thing is, do not give your kids the impression that they should be afraid of the world. You don't send your kids to a Christian school or homeschool them because the world might eat them alive. That's not what you want to communicate to your kids. You do it to equip them. Sometimes kids that get the best Christian foundation walk away because they are almost curious about what's outside their bubble. They need to understand while they are in your house what it looks like to engage a lost world and not be influenced, but to influence them. This is your training ground. This is your moment. We do not teach kids for 18 years and then hope that they know how to use it. My first parenting book is called Use It or Lose It for a reason, right? They need to use their faith. And using it means that they're serving, they're instrumental in their church, but then also that they're having spiritual conversations with other people that are challenging and pushing back on their faith. And so they need to understand greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. And my question for you is do you believe that's a verse for kids too? That's my question. So just make sure, does your life, is it structured in such a way that it appears you don't believe that greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world for your kids? So make sure they have that opportunity. The third thing is make sure your kids are actually Christ followers. Now that may seem like, Jim, that's like, duh, right? But kids who grow up in church are at a great advantage. But there's one danger that they face. It's the greatest danger that they face. The danger is that they will just be cultural Christians. That's a term that means a person who accepts the culture of Christianity, can talk the talk, agrees to the facts, pray to prayer so they won't go to hell, but never understood truly surrendering their life to Jesus. Look at what Jesus said in the Gospels about who was a Christ follower and who wasn't. He never said, pray a prayer. He said, deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me. He did say, believe in me. We downplay the word believe in the Bible. We almost just make it about the facts. Do you accept the facts that Jesus was God and he died on the cross and he rose again? A lot of times we baptize people and that's all we say. Do you believe Jesus Christ came, lived a sinless life, died on the cross and rose again for you? Yes. Oh, then I baptize you. Wait just a minute. Like there should be more to that question, right? The next question, the follow-up question should be, if you believe those facts, will you trust God with your life and surrender yourself to him? That's what biblical belief is. And so trusting God enough to surrender your life to him, that will drastically change your conversations with your child as they start to express interest in becoming a Christian, won't it? It's hard to convey this to a 7-year-old, right? hey, are you denying yourself and taking up your cross? Are you willing to do that? But you can talk about what that means in terms that they can understand in their world. Hey, a Christ follower is a person who puts what Jesus wants over what he wants. That means if Jesus asks you to give up, say, this toy that you love so that you could bless someone else, would you be willing to do that? Would you do that? That means that instead of growing up and just asking, what do I want to do with my life? It means asking the question, what does Jesus want me to do with my life? Well, what if those two things conflict? Well, if you're a Christ follower, you've surrendered to Jesus, so you go his way. That means I would probably be the first person to forgive if I have a problem with my friend. Make it clear, we don't become a Christian by just trying to obey Jesus. Don't make this about like, oh, well, then I need to forgive better and I need to give my toys away and then I'll be a Christian. No. That's not how it works. It's by grace through faith. But make it clear that accepting Jesus as your Savior means that you are signing off on him being the boss. You aren't just trusting him with the 10 seconds after you stop breathing. You're trusting him with your life here and right now. So make sure your kids get that. Make sure that they are a real believer and not just that they have just been taught the facts all their life and they believe the facts. The fourth thing is this: equip yourself to be able to teach your kids a thoroughly biblical worldview. I hate to tell you this, if you're parenting in this time, you have to be better equipped than any other generation. Frankly, if past generations had been better equipped these conversations to have these kind of conversations with our kids, we wouldn't be in a post-Christian culture. Now, you may feel like this is beyond you. You can't do this. But follow people online, on social media like Frank Turek, Elisa Childers, Natasha Crane, Allie Beth Stuckey. Follow Summit Ministries. Follow the Colson Center, all these kind of places. And make sure you catch this podcast once a week, because that's why we're diving into stuff like this, is so you'll know how to have these conversations with your kids. This generation of parents cannot afford to just take their kids to church and assume they're getting everything they need. You need to be having constant conversations with your kids about the interactions they're having with others and the things that they're hearing in class or on social media. You need to be intentionally bringing up false philosophies like Marxism and pluralism and evolution and having deep conversations about what the Bible says about those things. Again, it's even better if it's something that just popped up that day and say, hey, we should take some time to talk about what we just saw there. I've been saying a lot lately that it's not enough for you just to tell them the truth. There's that old illustration of, how do agents learn to spot a counterfeit bill? Well, they don't study the fakes, they just study the real one. That's great. Teach your kids the real thing. Teach them Christianity. Teach them the Bible. That's great. But you also, the lies are so sneaky nowadays. There are so many progressive Christians on social media that will tell them that the Bible doesn't mean what you've been told it means. And it appeals to them. They're like, wow, so that sounds like a kinder, like the way that I was told that the Bible meant that, like it was kind of cruel, but like that's a little nicer. So I like that. And so you literally need to be bringing up these things and pointing out how they are not biblical. If you are ever using the phrase, sometimes you just have to believe, to answer your kids' questions, I can promise you they're headed to the faith exit. So you can say, I don't know right now. Let's learn that together. But create an environment where questions are welcome and find those answers together. So I think really if you focus on those four things and make them just a constant part of the rhythm of your life, I think you're going to know what's going on in the heart of your child. I think you're going to have an opportunity to best equip them to face this world that we live in today. And I just wonder, did I miss something? Do you have any comments? I'd love to hear your comments on this issue. Thanks for joining me this week on the Spiritual Reality Podcast. Remember, if you're not living by what God says, you're not living in reality. We'll see you next Friday.